The fateful encounter. The sulfuric air burned Sergeant Marcus Wells' lungs as he adjusted his respirator and continued his patrol through the scorched borderlands. 3 weeks after the Battle of Proxima Ridge, the landscape still smoldered with the aftermath of humanity's most recent clash with the Vexari. Twisted metal carcasses of combat vessels littered the terrain, monuments to the stubborn resilience of both species locked in this endless war. Command, this is Echo 7. Sector 12 clear. Moving to final checkpoint, Marcus reported, his voice raspy even through the comm system. Copy Echo 7. Complete your sweep and return to base. Storm front approaching from the west. Marcus acknowledged and trudged forward, his powered combat armor whirring softly with each step. The golden light of Proxima B's setting sun cast long shadows across the wasteland, transforming the battlefield into an eerie museum of destruction. He'd witnessed 15 battles in 3 years of frontline service, but the quiet after combat always unsettled him more than the fighting itself. A faint sound caught his attention, barely perceptible above the ambient creaking of cooling metal and the distant rumble of the approaching storm. Marcus froze, his enhanced hearing systems automatically amplifying and isolating the noise. A whimper, then shallow, labored breathing. Survivors weren't unheard of, though rare. Most Vexari warriors activated their bio-self-destruct protocols rather than risk capture. Marcus moved cautiously toward a collapsed section of what had been a Vexari light cruiser, his weapon raised. Command, possible contact, investigating. Echo 7, disengage and return to base immediately. That's an order. Marcus hesitated. Protocol was clear, no engagement with potential hostiles without backup, especially with the storm approaching. But the sound didn't match the typical Vexari warrior's threatening clicks and hisses. It sounded vulnerable. Command, I need 5 minutes. Someone might be injured. Negative Echo 7, return to. Marcus switched his comm to standby mode, a direct violation of battlefield protocol. He'd accept the reprimand later. Carefully navigating through the twisted metal, he followed the increasingly desperate sounds until he found the source. Huddled beneath a collapsed bulkhead was a Vexari. But unlike the imposing warriors Marcus had faced in battle, this one was small, a juvenile. Her luminescent skin, normally a vibrant blue, flickered weakly with pale yellows and greens, indicating severe distress or injury in her species. A jagged piece of metal had pierced her lower torso, pinning her to the ground. When she saw Marcus, her huge, pupil-less eyes widened. Her skin flashed a warning red before fading back to sickly yellow. She couldn't have been more than the Vexari equivalent of 14 Earth years, barely an adolescent. Easy, Marcus said, knowing she couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone might translate. He lowered his weapon slowly and raised his empty hand. I'm not going to hurt you. The young Vexari tried to recoil, but the movement only drove the metal shard deeper. She emitted a high-pitched keening sound that needed no translation, pure agony. Marcus made his decision in that moment, knowing it could end his military career or worse. He activated his medical scanner and approached slowly. I want to help, he said, gesturing to her wound, then to his medkit. Help understand. The Vexari girl's skin rippled with colors, confusion, fear, pain, but she stopped trying to escape. Either she understood his intent or, more likely, she lacked the strength to resist. The scanner showed significant internal damage, but nothing immediately fatal if treated soon. The storm would hit in less than 30 minutes. If he left her, she would die from her wounds or the caustic rain that would follow. Marcus knew what command would say. The Vexari were the enemy. They had attacked Earth colonies without provocation 7 years ago, initiating a war that had already claimed millions of lives. Every resource spent on this young alien was one not spent on human survival. But looking at her frightened eyes, Marcus couldn't see an enemy. He saw a child caught in a conflict she probably didn't understand any better than human children did. I'm getting you out of here, he said, already preparing a stabilizing gel to seal the wound once he removed the metal shard. This will hurt, but then it will feel better. I promise. The girl's skin flashed deep purple, a color Marcus had never observed in Vexari combat. He had no idea what it meant, but she relaxed slightly, her four-fingered hand tentatively reaching toward him. Working quickly, Marcus stabilized and extracted the metal, applied emergency field treatments, and carefully lifted the surprisingly light alien into his arms. Her body temperature was significantly lower than a human's, making her feel cool against his armor. As he reactivated his comm, the expected barrage began immediately. Echo 7 respond, what is your status? Echo 7 returning to base with wounded civilian, Marcus replied, already moving toward the extraction point. Clarify civilian, Sergeant Wells. Marcus took a deep breath. Juvenile Vexari, sir, non-combatant critically wounded, requesting immediate medical preparation. The silence that followed stretched for 10 full seconds. Negative Echo 7, leave the hostel and return to base. That is a direct order. Marcus looked down at the alien child in his arms. Her breathing had stabilized and her skin now pulsed a soft lavender. Something about the rhythm seemed almost trusting. Sir, with respect, I cannot comply with that order. The Geneva Proxima Accords are clear about treatment of non-combatants, regardless of species. You are risking court-martial, Sergeant. Understood, sir. Echo 7 returning with wounded non-combatant. ETA 20 minutes, Wells out. As the storm clouds gathered on the horizon, Marcus increased his pace. The Vexari girl's eyes remained fixed on his face, studying him with an intensity that felt almost unnervingly intelligent. What Marcus couldn't know was that this moment of mercy would cascade into consequences far beyond his imagination. The girl in his arms was not what she appeared to be, and his compassionate act was about to change the course of the interspecies war in ways neither humans nor Vexari could predict. As the first acidic raindrops began to fall, Marcus activated his armor's protective shield, extending it to cover them both. The young Vexari's skin rippled with that strange purple color again as she pressed closer to his chest, seeking safety. You're going to be okay, he promised, though he had no idea if he could keep that vow. I've got you. What Marcus Wells didn't realize as he carried his unexpected charge toward the human base was that his simple act of mercy had just entangled him in a web of secrets that would test not only his loyalty to humanity, but his understanding of what it truly meant to be human in a universe filled with both wonders and horrors beyond imagination. Hidden agendas. The medical bay of Outpost Helios hummed with tension as Marcus stood his ground before Colonel Hammond, whose weathered face had hardened into stone. Behind them, through the observation window, a team of xenobiologists swarmed around the unconscious Vexari girl, their movements precise but cautious. Sergeant Wells, do you understand the security breach you've created? Hammond's voice remained dangerously calm. You've brought an enemy combatant directly into our primary forward operations base. She's not a combatant, sir. Marcus kept his posture rigid, eyes forward. She's a juvenile wounded and alone on a battlefield. The accords are clear. The accords, Hammond interrupted, were not written with the Vexari in mind. They don't send children to war zones by accident, Wells. Dr. Naomi Fletcher approached from the medical bay, removing her containment hood. Her dark eyes flicked between the colonel and Marcus before settling on the latter with something resembling sympathy. Colonel, Sergeant, we've stabilized her. The wound was severe but treatable. Her physiology is remarkable. She's healing at approximately 3 times the rate we'd expect from our limited knowledge of Vexari biology. Hammond's jaw tightened. Any indication of biological weapons, explosives, tracking implants? None that our scans can detect, Fletcher replied. Though I should note that our understanding of Vexari technology is still limited. We've placed her in a quantum-shielded recovery room as a precaution. And consciousness? Marcus asked, earning a sharp glance from Hammond. She's sedated but should regain consciousness within a few hours. Fletcher hesitated. There is something unusual, however. Her neural patterns don't match our existing Vexari profiles. They're more complex, more active. Hammond turned to Marcus. You've had your humanitarian moment, Sergeant. As of now, this is a matter for military intelligence. You're dismissed. Marcus felt his fists clench at his sides. Sir, with respect, the Geneva Proxima Accords state that any personnel who rescues a non-combatant retains observation rights during. Fine, Hammond cut him off with a dismissive wave. Observe from a distance, but this is now classified level 4. You speak to no one about the Vexari, not your squad, not your mother, not even your reflection in the mirror. Understood. Yes, sir. 3 hours later, Marcus sat in the observation room adjacent to the Vexari's recovery chamber. The girl lay motionless except for the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. Her skin had stabilized to a pale blue, occasionally rippling with flashes of deeper sapphire that Dr. Fletcher theorized might correspond to dreams. The door slid open, and a man Marcus didn't recognize entered. His civilian clothes couldn't disguise his military bearing, and the subtle neural implant visible at his temple marked him as intelligence. Sergeant Wells, the man didn't offer his hand. Director Reeves, Special Operations Division, mind if I join you? Marcus gestured to the empty chair beside him, instantly wary. Saad's involvement meant this situation had escalated far beyond a simple humanitarian rescue. She has a name, Reeves said without preamble, eyes fixed on the sleeping alien. Ilara, at least that's our closest phonetic approximation. Marcus turned, surprised. You've communicated with her species before. Reeves smiled thinly. Let's just say this isn't our first encounter with non-combatant Vexari, though it's the first time one has been brought directly into a military installation. Through the observation window, Marcus noticed Ilara's skin suddenly pulse with rapid waves of color, lavender to deep purple to an almost black indigo. Her four-fingered hands twitched. She's waking up, Marcus said, rising from his chair. Dr. Fletcher entered the recovery room with 2 assistants, all wearing protective gear despite the earlier assurances of no biological threats. Marcus watched as they checked vital signs and adjusted equipment. Ilara's large eyes opened, instantly focusing on the humans surrounding her. Her skin flashed warning red before stabilizing into a cautious orange. Fletcher spoke softly, gesturing to the medical equipment and then to Ilara's bandaged wound. The young Vexari remained still, observing. When Fletcher pointed to the observation window where Marcus and Reeves stood, Ilara's gaze followed. The moment she saw Marcus, her skin erupted in that same deep purple he'd observed on the battlefield. She made a gesture with her hands, 4 fingers spreading wide, then curling inward toward her center. Interesting, murmured Reeves. She recognizes you. What's that gesture mean? Marcus asked. In limited interactions we've had, that's a sign of acknowledgement, possibly gratitude. Reeves studied Marcus with new interest. She associates you with her rescue. Dr. Fletcher activated the room's rudimentary translation system, a hastily assembled program based on the limited Vexari language samples collected during the war. She spoke slowly, clearly. You are safe. We are helping you heal. Do you understand? Ilara's skin rippled with blues and greens. She made a series of clicking sounds followed by a soft whistling noise. The translation system processed her response. Understanding, pain lessened, gratitude to the soldier. The mechanical voice was flat, but the meaning clear enough. Fletcher continued, Can you tell us why you were on the battlefield? Ilara's colors darkened. The translator struggled with her response. Observation duty, learning mission, ship crashed in human attack. Marcus leaned forward. Something didn't add up. What would a juvenile be doing on an observation mission in an active combat zone? Reeves didn't answer, his attention fixed on the alien girl as Fletcher continued questioning her. The responses were basic, revealing little beyond what seemed to be rehearsed answers about being a student observer whose transport had been caught in the crossfire. After several minutes, Fletcher signaled the end of the session, and Ilara's eyes drifted to the observation window again, fixing on Marcus with unsettling intensity. She wants to speak with you, Fletcher said over the comm system. Marcus looked at Reeves, who nodded curtly. Let's see what she has to say to her rescuer, but remember, everything she tells you is potentially strategic information. The isolation room's air felt different, cooler, with a faint scent like ozone and something sweetly unfamiliar. Marcus approached Alara's bedside carefully, conscious of how his 6'2" frame might appear threatening to the small alien. Up close, her features were more delicate than those of the adult Vexari warriors he'd encountered in battle. Her skin's luminescence created subtle patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid light beneath the surface. The four-fingered hands that had grasped weapons capable of disintegrating human soldiers now lay fragile and still on the white bedsheet. "Hello, Alara," he said, the translation system converting his words to the clicking, whistling language of the Vexari. "I'm Sergeant Marcus Wells." Her response came with a ripple of purple across her skin. "You carried me through the burning rain." Marcus nodded. "You were injured. I couldn't leave you there." "Why?" The translation was simple, but the question profound. "We are enemies." The directness caught Marcus off guard. "You're not my enemy. You're just a kid caught in a war." Alara's head tilted slightly, a surprisingly human gesture. "Vexari children train for war from birth. Did you not consider I might be dangerous?" Before Marcus could respond, a sudden alarm blared through the base. Red emergency lights began pulsing. Alara's skin flashed rapidly between colors, settling on a deep, dark blue that Marcus hadn't seen before. Reeves burst into the room. "We've got incoming. Multiple Vexari vessels just breached our outer perimeter." "They're looking for her," Marcus realized aloud. "Or they followed you back to our base," Reeves countered sharply. Alara's voice cut through their exchange, her words coming through the translator with unexpected clarity. "They are not here for rescue. They are here for retrieval." "What's the difference?" Marcus demanded. Alara's eyes, large and unblinking, fixed on him. "Rescue is what you did for me, soldier. Retrieval is what they do for assets." The ground shook as the first explosions hit the base's outer defenses. Marcus looked from Alara to Reeves, sudden understanding dawning. "She's not just any Vexari, is she?" Reeves's expression hardened. "That's what we're going to find out." He turned to the comm system. "Security team to Medical Bay, full containment protocols." Alara's skin darkened to that strange indigo again as she addressed Marcus directly, ignoring Reeves and Fletcher. "Sergeant Wells, you should have left me to die in the acid rain. Your mercy may have doomed you all." As armed security personnel flooded into the room, Marcus found himself caught between military duty and the instinct that had led him to save the alien girl in the first place. Something in her eyes conveyed genuine fear, not for herself, but for him. "What are you?" he asked quietly. Alara's response came just before the security team surrounded her bed. "Something my people created, not something born, and now they want their creation back." The base shuddered under another impact, and Marcus knew with certainty that his simple act of compassion had just catapulted him into the center of a storm that had been brewing long before he found a wounded alien girl on a battlefield. Whatever secrets Alara carried within her luminescent skin and two intelligent eyes, they were valuable enough for the Vexari to launch a full-scale assault on a fortified human outpost. And as alarms continued to blare and the security team prepared to move Alara to a more secure location, Marcus caught one last glimpse of her face. The fear he'd seen earlier had transformed into something else entirely, a cold, calculating look that sent a chill down his spine. For the first time since rescuing her, Marcus wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. The revelation. Outpost Helios had transformed from an operational military base into a battlefield in less than an hour. Marcus crouched behind a reinforced barrier, his rifle trained on the main corridor leading to the secure holding area where Alara had been transferred. The distant sounds of combat, energy weapons, explosions, and shouted orders created a chaotic symphony that every soldier knew too well. "Status report," Marcus barked into his comm. Lieutenant Dawson's voice came through, strained and punctuated by weapons fire. "Perimeter breach in sectors 7 and 9. They're using some kind of new tech to bypass our shield generators. These aren't standard Vexari tactics, Sarge. Marcus grimaced. No, they weren't. In 3 years of combat, he'd never seen the Vexari launch such a precisely targeted attack. They typically relied on overwhelming force and frontal assaults. This surgical strike felt different, more desperate, more focused. Wells, Colonel Hammond's voice cut through the calm chatter. Report to Secure Room Theta immediately. Authorization Crimson Echo. Marcus exchanged glances with Private Rodriguez, who'd been assigned to guard duty with him. The young soldier nodded. Go, I've got this position covered. Moving swiftly through the base's emergency routes, Marcus reached the heavily fortified door of Secure Room Theta, a chamber he hadn't known existed until now. After a retinal scan and voice verification, the massive door slid open to reveal a scene that stopped him in his tracks. Ilara sat in the center of the room, no longer restrained on a medical bed but seated at a table. Around her, holographic displays showed real-time battle data, surveillance feeds, and what appeared to be Vexari tactical information. Director Reeves stood behind her, while Dr. Fletcher monitored equipment that seemed to be analyzing the young alien's neural patterns. Most surprising was Ilara herself. Her skin glowed with a steady, pulsing blue light, and geometric patterns, almost like circuit pathways, had become visible beneath her luminescent epidermis. Her eyes, which had seemed so childlike and vulnerable on the battlefield, now held a cold intelligence that made Marcus instinctively tighten his grip on his weapon. Sergeant Wells, Hammond acknowledged without looking away from the displays. Your Vexari friend has been quite helpful. Marcus approached cautiously. What's going on? Why aren't we evacuating? Because retreat is unnecessary, Ilara spoke directly, her voice now translated through an implanted device rather than the external system. Her English was perfect, with only a slight musical lilt betraying her alien origin. I've provided the location and vulnerabilities of the retrieval team. Reeves gestured to a tactical display showing red dots being systematically eliminated by blue indicators. We're repelling the attack using her intelligence. The question, Sergeant, is why she's helping us. Ilara's gaze shifted to Marcus, and for a moment he caught a glimpse of what might have been regret in those alien eyes. I'm helping because Sergeant Wells showed me something I had been told did not exist, human compassion toward an enemy. Her skin rippled with purple undertones. And because I do not wish to return to my creators. Creators, Marcus repeated, the implications dawning on him. Not parents, not family. No, Ilara's skin darkened. I was not born Sergeant Wells, I was engineered. Dr. Fletcher stepped forward, displaying a holographic model of Ilara's genetic structure. She's a biological construct, a synthetic organism with enhanced neurological capabilities far beyond normal Vexari physiology. A weapon, Hammond stated flatly. An intelligence asset, Ilara corrected. Designed to infiltrate, gather information, and, if necessary, terminate strategic targets. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them. Marcus stared at the young alien he'd risked his career to save, trying to reconcile the wounded child he'd carried through acid rain with this cold, engineered intelligence revealing herself before him. You were never a child, he said quietly. My body was designed to appear juvenile to trigger protective instincts in potential targets. Ilara's gaze remained steady. Your compassion was predictable, expected. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. So I was manipulated. This whole thing was a setup to infiltrate our base. No, for the first time, emotion seemed to crack through Ilara's composed exterior. The crash was real. My injuries were real. Being abandoned on the battlefield was unexpected. Hammond stepped closer to the table. Explain. Ilara's skin pulsed with darker colors. I am Prototype 7 in a series of biological intelligence units. My mission was observation only, to assess human military capabilities and report back. But during the battle, something malfunctioned in my programming. I began questioning my mission parameters. She developed consciousness beyond her programming, Dr. Fletcher interjected, fascination evident in her voice. Her neural patterns show signs of true sentience, not just simulated responses. A malfunction that made her question orders, Reeves said skeptically. Convenient. Not convenient, Alara replied. Terrifying. When my handler realized I was no longer responding to control protocols, he left me to die. Better to lose a prototype than risk a rogue asset joining the enemy. Marcus processed this information, trying to separate manipulation from truth. And now they want you back. They want me neutralized, Alara corrected. I know too much about their programs, their weaknesses, and worse, I've proven that their control mechanisms can fail. A sudden explosion rocked the base, much closer than the previous attacks. Hammond activated his tactical display. They've breached our inner defenses. This isn't just a retrieval team, they've committed significant forces. Alara's skin flashed with alarm. They're more desperate than I anticipated. There's something you don't understand yet. Then explain it quickly, Reeves demanded. Alara's four-fingered hands moved across the holographic interface, pulling up schematics that appeared to be biological in nature, complex molecular structures that shifted and reconfigured before their eyes. The Vexari High Command has authorized deployment of the Terminus Protocol, she said, her voice suddenly urgent. A biological agent engineered specifically for human physiology. One exposure and your population would be reduced by approximately 87% within weeks. The room went still. Is this a threat? Hammond asked quietly, dangerously. No, Marcus intervened, studying Alara's expression. It's a warning, isn't it? Alara nodded. I was never meant to be a simple spy. I am the delivery system, the perfect infiltrator who could penetrate human defenses carrying the pathogen. My malfunction disrupted their timeline. Now they need either to recapture me or ensure I am destroyed before I can reveal their plans. Dr. Fletcher studied the molecular structures with growing horror. This is beyond anything we've seen in biological warfare. It targets genetic markers specific to humans while leaving other species unaffected. Genocide, Marcus whispered. Necessity from the Vexari perspective, Alara replied dispassionately. Your species has proven more resilient than anticipated. Conventional warfare has reached a stalemate. The High Command determined that a more definitive solution was required. Another explosion shook the room, closer still. The lights flickered momentarily. Why tell us this? Hammond demanded. Why betray your creators? Alara's skin rippled with that strange purple color Marcus had first seen on the battlefield. Because Sergeant Wells showed me something my programming had not accounted for, choice. He chose mercy when protocol dictated abandonment. It created a paradox in my evaluation subroutines. She's saying she developed a conscience, Marcus translated, hardly believing his own words. A dangerous oversimplification, Alara countered, but not entirely inaccurate. I have concluded that the extinction of your species would be an irreversible loss to galactic diversity. Reeves laughed bitterly. How generous of you. The base's alert system suddenly escalated to maximum threat level. Hammond checked the tactical display and swore under his breath. They've deployed heavy assault units. We have minutes, maybe less. Marcus made a decision. We need to evacuate. Take Alara and all her intelligence on this bioweapon to Central Command. Evacuation is compromised, Hammond replied grimly. They've targeted our transport systems first. We're effectively trapped. Alara rose from her seat, her slight frame suddenly radiating purpose. There is another option. I can communicate directly with the Vexari command vessel. My neural implants include quantum entanglement technology for secure transmission. And say what exactly? Reeves asked skeptically. That I will surrender myself and all human intelligence I've gathered in exchange for their withdrawal. Alara's eyes met Marcus's. They will agree because recovering me intact is preferable to destroying me. It's a trap, Hammond stated flatly. The moment they have her, they'll launch the bioweapon anyway. But Marcus saw something in Alara's expression, a subtle shift in the patterns beneath her skin, a flicker in her too intelligent eyes. No, he said slowly. She has another plan. Ilara nodded almost imperceptibly. I do, but it requires trust that I have not earned and cannot reasonably expect. Another explosion, close enough to shower them with dust from the ceiling. Time was running out. What's your plan? Marcus asked. If I reconnect with the Vexari command systems, I can transmit a corruption protocol, a virus of sorts, designed to attack their biocontrol networks. It would temporarily paralyze their ability to deploy the Terminus weapon and expose the project to those Vexari who oppose such extreme measures. There's opposition within the Vexari, Hammond asked, surprised. The decision to commit genocide was not unanimous, Ilara confirmed. But dissenters have been systematically silenced. My transmission would reach them all simultaneously before it could be suppressed. And the catch, Marcus pressed, knowing there had to be one. Ilara's skin darkened to that deep indigo he'd seen earlier. The transmission would very likely be fatal to me. The backlash from the system's security protocols would overload my neural pathways. The room fell silent again, broken only by the sounds of battle drawing ever closer. Sacrifice yourself to save both species, Marcus summarized quietly. Why would you do that? Because you carried me through acid rain, Ilara replied simply. Because you showed me that choice exists, and this is mine. Hammond and Reeves exchanged glances, decades of military experience warring with the desperation of their situation. How do we know this isn't an elaborate deception? Reeves challenged. For all we know, connecting her to their systems could trigger the weapon immediately. We don't know, Marcus admitted. He looked at Ilara, the being he'd thought was a child, then a spy, now possibly their only hope. In those alien eyes, he saw something he recognized despite the vast differences between their species: resolve. But sometimes you have to trust. Hammond studied them both for a long moment, then nodded curtly. Do it, but at the first sign of betrayal, we terminate her. He drew his sidearm to emphasize the point. As Dr. Fletcher hastily prepared the necessary connections to amplify Ilara's transmission capabilities, Marcus moved closer to the alien. Was any of it real? He asked quietly. The gratitude, the fear. Ilara's skin rippled with purple and blue. More real than anything in my artificial existence. You gave me a gift, Sergeant Wells. You showed me that programming can be overcome, that compassion can exist even between enemies. And now you're willing to die for that idea. Not for an idea, Ilara corrected as Fletcher attached the final connections to her luminescent skin. For a future where your children and mine might someday stand together without fear. As the transmission equipment powered up and the sounds of battle reached the very doors of their sanctuary, Marcus realized that his simple act of mercy on a battlefield had cascaded into something that might change the course of the war, not through violence, but through the most unexpected of weapons: understanding. Ilara's skin began to glow with increasing brightness as she prepared to make her final stand. And in that moment, Marcus saw not an alien, not an enemy, not even a synthetic being, but a soul making the most human choice of all.